What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in. Today's episode, we're taking a look at a review of 2024 and the things that stood out the most. All right, you guys, let's talk about this stuff that we got this year. There wasn't a whole lot that I really, kind of felt wowed by, I guess you would say, as far as gear goes. I didn't buy a whole lot either. So some of the things that stood out, we're going to talk about. First up will be this pedal here. This is the Seckman Overdrive. Now, this was gifted to me, but this thing is incredible. There's a lot of power in this pedal. One thing I've noticed about it is the gain pot is a dual, it's like a dual pot. So you're doing a wet dry mix. You really want to run that past 9 o'clock. Typically I will put it somewhere around 10, 11 o'clock. And that's kind of where it'll stay. It makes the pedal sound that much better. It adds the saturation. You're blending in the wet signal as you dial it up. So keep that in mind. Now, the volume pot is another thing I noticed. There is a boatload of power in this pedal. And when you max out that volume pot, it's got a weird kind of sound to it. And I think what's happening is there's too much power in the pedal for a lot of amps and it's blowing the circuit out. So it's actually distorting it in a negative way. You're not getting a good saturation out of it. So just kind of roll that volume back, probably to around 1, 2 o'clock has been kind of the sweet spot, I guess, for the maximum amount of power before you really blow that signal out. The internal trim pot was really cool. It allows you to kind of sit the mids where you want them to sit in the mix. And it just adds an extra little flexibility to it. So this has been a really good pedal for a lot of the high gain amps, like my Mesa, my Knucklehead Reverb, and things like that. All right, so let's talk about one thing that you don't actually see on the channel that I actually upgraded to, and that's my vocal mic. I haven't quite found one that really fit me, that I enjoyed. I do use a channel strip. It's a DBX 286S, so that kind of has the compressor and the de-esser and all that stuff, but I haven't really found a vocal mic that really fits the sound or the look, all that stuff. So the one that I got was the Lawton Audio LS208. And it has been by far the best sounding vocal mic I own. Out of all the vocal mics that I do own, or out of the other microphones I own, this is by far the best sounding one. The noise rejection this thing has is incredible. The built-in high cut, low cut filters that are on it as well has been a big improvement. I live in a noisy apartment, so there's a stairwell that actually is behind this wall, and then I have neighbors upstairs. And it has really helped to kind of reject a lot of those noises. So I keep the low cut at 50 hertz. Or I guess that's the high cut, whatever. I always get them backwards. So I use the 50 hertz that's built in. So you have two choices with three. You can have no filter. Then you can have a 50 hertz cut and a 120 or 140 hertz cut. One of the two, I forgot. It's either 120 or 140. And then for the top end, you have a no cut, you have 8,000 and 10,000. So you've got some variety there. I think one day I'm going to take the microphone down and use it as a guitar mic. And I want to see how well it sounds in that context, but we'll do that in another video. All right. So another pedal we got this year that I think is fantastic. It's actually a noise gate, and that's the Spectral Gate from This Heavy Earth. Shay knocked it out of the park. This thing is incredible. The tightness of the pedal in between your palm mutes is it's perfect for me. It's perfect. Right out the gate, no pun intended, but right out of the gate, this thing is it does everything perfectly. It's quiet. It's tight. One thing I've noticed on some of the gates, depending upon the amp that I use, if the gain is too high, you can really hear that stutter as that gate kind of clamps down. And I don't have that issue with this pedal. So this has quickly become probably my favorite gate that's currently on the market. There's still plenty of gates out there that are fantastic, but for me, the way I use them in the home studio, this thing is perfect. And that's probably going to be the permanent setup going forward. So let's talk about another pedal we got that I actually don't have it at the moment to show you because I sent it to truck driver Sean. He's going to check it out. He's actually got it. And yeah, so that is a Klon pedal, and it's the Clone Ranger from Too Much Audio. I'm a big fan of the Klon circuit. I've got probably 15 Klon pedals at the moment, and each one has a very standout, kind of thing about it. And this one really stood out to me this year because It's the only Klon pedal I have that has an asymmetrical clipping. I'm sure there's others out there. I just don't own them or I don't know about them. And this one, Mark did a fantastic job. When I did my shootout against a real Klon KTR that I own, I thought it sounded spot on. They were almost 100% identical. There's going to be some variations with all pedals. There's part tolerance. There's, different resistor values. The different components are going to make up a slightly different variation. But for the most part, it is a spot on sound. And having the asymmetrical clipping just kind of opened it up, gave it some breathing room, and it just sounded really good. It sounded fantastic. And that was probably the biggest thing that I noticed about Mark's version of a Klon. So that one really stood out to me this year. Now let's talk about a guitar that I got, and that is my Dave Grohl Epiphone, the DG335. It's a great guitar. It really is. A lot of people are talking bad about it because it's an Epiphone, and it is what it is. Not everybody can afford, a $10,000 or $15,000 Gibson that's been out of production for 10 plus years. And I wanted one of those. I wanted the Gibson one. I wanted the gold one, to be honest. And I was kind of bummed out because I was expecting this to come out and the prices of the Gibsons to drop, and it didn't happen. And this one only comes in Pelham Blue. Overall, it's a great guitar. The price is kind of steep for what it is, I think. Part of that is probably the name you're paying for who it's associated with. But you got quality pickups. You've got, CTS pots, Switchcraft jacks and switches, Tusknut, Grover tuners. I mean, it's got a plethora of high-end, upper level electronics pickups and all that stuff. So you're getting a very good quality guitar. This one, I think, is built in the same factory as the the Epiphone custom shop. So it's got probably a little higher level of quality control than just kind of the run-of-the-mill Epiphones you can buy off the shelf. But this one is a really good guitar. I'm really pleased with it. I have no major complaints. You can nitpick stuff like I don't like poly finish, so that's a personal preference. The color is kind of more of a silver than it is a Pelham blue. I think that's also kind of noticeable in various photos that are out there. Not really an aged Pelham blue, but it's a little more silver than it is blue. So it fit my need for a semi-hollow body, and it sounds great. Let's talk about some stuff that I also got that you don't really get to see as well. And that's going to be the key light. It's a CB60 from Neewer. Fantastic light. It's actually got I got it mostly because it's got the little remote. Like right now we're at 1%. That's 0. So that's 1%. And it's a fantastic light. I got a little, shadow box on it or whatever you call it with the grid. And yeah, it works out really well. It gives me a nice bright lighting for the foreground, and I can keep the background kind of at standard, somewhat dim level. So that was a big improvement. I got it on a good sale. And another thing that can tie into that, and you can notice that nice bokeh, as they call it in the photography world, but that is my cameras. I actually have 2 of them. So I got one that's filming, and I got this one here I use as my B-roll footage stuff. And I like to travel, and I like photography a lot. So I got some cameras finally to replace my old DSLR stuff. But I went with a Nikon Z30, and it's just been a really good camera, both of them. I bought this one used. I bought one brand new. So what I learned was the kit lenses, as most kit lenses, aren't that good. For a starter, they're fine, but I ended up going with Viltrox. I got a couple of their lenses. This one here on this camera is a Viltrox 13mm prime. So it's a f1.4, fantastic prime lens, especially for the price point. I got mine used at mpb.com, and it's just a fantastic lens. So for quality gear at a fraction of the cost, check out places like B&H Photo, Adorama, mpb.com. So the one that we're looking at now that's actually installed is also a Viltrox. This one is a 23mm prime, and it's also an f1.4. I have 4 Viltrox lenses in various prime settings, and they are just fantastic, and they take incredible photos. All right, you guys, that's going to kind of do it for today's episode. Again, we were just kind of doing a yearly review to see, kind of the things that stood out from the year. And it was a good year overall. I had a lot of great concerts this year. I picked up some decent gear. And these are the things that kind of stood out the most to me for 2024. So going forward, we're going to see what happens next year. I got some plans in the works. Some of the stuff is already here. Still waiting on some stuff to come in stock. And yeah, we're going to see what happens. So thanks for watching. See you guys in January of 25. And yeah, we'll talk to you then.